hurry up and run. Get it? Welcome to start out. First order of business would be to have Michael call roll, please.
Alderman Bob Bauman.
Here.
Senator LaTanya Johnson.
Here.
Mr. James Cantor.
Here.
Ms. Liz Sumner. Representative Jesse Rodriguez. Here. Mr. Bill Christensen.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great. Thank you. Second order of business, and Steve promises me this will be a relatively efficient meeting. Any pressure on. Second order of business is any discussion of the meeting minutes from October 17th, 2024. If you have any discussion, if not, I would move for a motion for approval. Do you have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of approval of meeting minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Meeting minutes from October 17th are approved. And 25th.
Yeah, there were two meetings.
There were two meetings. I remember that. Yeah. Yep. Steve, we'll take over to you for our financial reporting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Today's financial update will be our last review of 24 financial activity until Baker Tilly's presentation of the audited financial statements at the May board meeting. Overall, today's financial news regarding 2024 is positive and not materially different from the update that was provided to the board in October. Before we get into the numbers, just a couple quick updates. Number one, regarding 2025, we continue to forecast the budget the board adopted in October. For your reference, we've included in today's packet the 2025 budget income statement and capital budget on pages 17 through 20. We'll provide a more comprehensive update on 2025 financial activity at the May board meeting. And number two, Baker Tilly is in process of conducting their preliminary 2024 audit field work. No issues or concerns have been identified thus far. The district's finance team will be spending the better part of the next 45 days preparing for their primary field work, which is scheduled to occur in March. And those results will be presented by Baker Tilly to this committee at the May meeting as part of the final audit. So let's get into the 2024 review. And while I traditionally like to start with identifying the bottom line net income number first, and we did beat our budget net income in 2024, which we'll talk about in just a minute. I do want to first summarize the significance of the financial successes we had this past fiscal year. When Marty and I presented the 2024 budget in the fall of 2023, we identified two specific outcomes we sought to achieve in the upcoming fiscal year. Number one was to show year-over-year growth in the district's unrestricted fund balance. This was an important goal for the district for several reasons. Number one, it's the lifeblood of the district. It's a working capital management used to support the ongoing operations of the business and allows us to make investments in our two most important assets, our people and our buildings. Without a stable and healthy unrestricted fund balance, the business can't grow. In 2023, we had negative cash flow in this fund, which was planned for, in order to make the necessary investments in preparation for the opening of the expansion, which further stressed the importance to show growth in 2024. And I'm proud to say we achieved this goal. The second outcome we sought to show was year-over-year growth in the district's restricted reserve fund. Annual growth in this fund has been a central component of the district's long-term financial strategy established in 2020 and most recently reviewed with this committee at the October board meeting. A robust restricted reserve fund serves as a critical mitigation strategy to adequately protect the district from an unexpected decrease in restricted tax revenue collections as a result of dramatic economic events such as the COVID pandemic. In 2024, we in fact did grow the balance in this fund to a level that exceeded what management believes is necessary to mitigate this risk. Thus, an opportunity formed to put those excess funds to work for the district, which ultimately resulted in the defeasance transaction the board authorized in October. That transaction produced three critical outcomes. Number one, it saved the district millions of dollars in long-term debt service payments. Number two, it created long-term future borrowing capacity and flexibility, which is the fifth prong of the district's long-term strategic financial plan. And number three, it resulted in a bond rating upgrade from S&P by not one but two notches, taking the district from BBB positive to A. This will lower future borrowing costs for the district. Probably can't convey enough how much I personally ruminate on the health of these fund balances, but I am extremely proud of the work that both management and the board has done to get them to their current condition, which is ever the more extraordinary coming out of the economic conditions we faced during COVID. These balances are a position of strength for the district. In addition to these fund balance objectives we established for 2024, there are three other notable successes I want to mention. Number one, of course, is the completion of the expansion project on time and within the financial parameters set forth in the authorizing resolutions adopted by the board in 2020 and 2022. Marty and Mike Abrams from ICON will discuss the project lifecycle in more detail in next week's board meeting, but let me just say it's simply remarkable that this project was completed in such a successful way. Number two, and in part related to number one, excess investment income earned from project proceeds boosted the balance of contingency funds on hand and allowed the district to make additional capital investments in both the north and south buildings. The investments made this year will reduce pressure on future capital expenditure budgets, a strategy that will preserve the strength of our fund balances. And number three, I'd be remiss if I did not mention the significance of the events we hosted in 2024. The impact to our operating P&L was meaningful, of course, but the value these events generated in terms of awareness to our properties in the city of Milwaukee cannot be understated. In June, Sarah Mayo presented to the board the value the opening night gala had in terms of media impressions. The RNC event brought international attention to our campus and Milwaukee, and the Connect conference hosted in September exposed meeting planners from all over the world to our buildings and city. The dividends the district will receive from these events in terms of future business is invaluable and will keep our sales team extremely occupied going forward, which is a good thing. Stable fund balances, long-term capital planning flexibility, a successfully completed expansion project, and a destination that is in high demand. The achievements of 2024 have created a future for the district that is healthy and full of opportunity. So with that said, let's get into the numbers. We're going to start with our event mix summary first, which is page 6 of your packet. Column C represents the number of events we actualized in 2024. Column B represents the number of events we budgeted. As you can see, we fell short of our budget goal by 10 events, 319 compared to 309. You'll notice a big variance in our corporate meetings category on line 5. Typically, these event types contribute less to the bottom line than others, so the overall financial impact was minimized, and as you'll see in a moment, did not prevent us from beating our budget net income number. And while we did not hit our budget, our event budget number, we did exceed last year's total significantly. We believe we are well positioned to achieve the number we budgeted for in 2025. So with the event mix as a backdrop, let's get into the 24 numbers. We're going to start with the income statement first on page 8 of your packet, with column IDs E, F, G, and H at the top, which compares our annual budget to our annual forecast. And to get right to the point, you can see on line 35, column G, we exceeded budget net income before depreciation and expansion debt by almost $4.2 million. So how do we get there? Scrolling into line 14, column H, total operating income is up by almost 7%. Overall, event revenues, as noted on lines 1 through 5 and 8 and 9, collectively came in much stronger than budget by about $1.6 million. That's quite remarkable considering we hosted less events than budgeted. As discussed in October, you can see lines 10 advertising revenue and line 12 parking revenue missed budget expectations. However, we remain optimistic that we will see substantial gains in these categories in 2025. Moving down to line 27, column H, operating expenses exceeded budget by about 11%. Line 15, labor, line 17, contract services, and line 18, utilities are all over budget. And really, this is a reflection of attempting to develop a budget around a theoretical operating plan for the North Building. I think I beat to death the topic of utilities in October, and I believe we're better dialed in on what to expect for 2025. As for the other two categories, labor and contract services, there were a few contributing factors to this overage. One was the need to bring in some temporary labor to backfill positions that we could either not hire qualified candidates for or due to attrition had to be filled temporarily as we went through the recruiting process. Temp labor on a per hour basis is just more expensive for the district. And two, there were moments this year where we felt compelled to staff at levels greater than we expect to see moving forward due to either training needs or to have redundancy in the North Building to protect against the unexpected. We look to have a more optimized labor model in 2025. You'll notice the event expense category, line 20, is over budget. This line item captures primarily those payments made to our arena tenants in the form of revenue share on food and beverage and merchandise sales. The Admirals in particular had a strong ending to their 23-24 season via an extended playoff run, which helped drive up this number. Line 34 tax revenues is better than budget. To be clear, these numbers represent actual collections for October, with November, December collections forecasted at last year's actuals for now. So there is some potential for upside here after these go final in February. And line 35 interest income is also better than budget, primarily due to investment income earned on project proceeds. As noted during the budget presentation, we expect this category to normalize in 2025. As for non-operating expenses, no new update on big variances since October. Line 49 Visit Milwaukee is up relative to budget by about $230K. This is due to stronger than expected city tax revenues earned in fourth quarter of 23, as well as better than expected county tax revenues in 2024. And line 50 legal services is up as Hush Blackwell became the district's attorney of record in 2024. We spent time working together to bring them up to speed on district business issues. All of this leaves us with a positive variance to budget net income of almost $4.2 million, as noted on line 65. Moving to page 11 of your packet, which is the income statement reconciliation exhibit. The purpose of this exhibit is to break out for you how various elements of our business flow into the restricted and unrestricted funds, which isn't always so transparent by simply looking at the income statements. Unless there's questions, we're going to spend a lot of time on this today as we reviewed this pretty substantially in October, and there have only been some minor changes since then. Pages 12 and 13 provide a current snapshot of our 2024 capital expenditures. Looking at line 43, you'll see that we're coming in under budget by approximately $205K. You'll see quite a few projects that were not undertaken, as noted by the $0 figures spent in the forecast column. And on the next page, page 13, you'll see a number of projects or items purchased that were unplanned for, but needed to be addressed this fiscal year. Overall, the focus of this year's capital spending has been on projects that deal with life safety, building functionality, code compliance, revenue generation, and contractual obligations. At present, the district is not concerned about meeting future capital maintenance needs. Pages 14, 15, and 16 in our packet are cash flow projections. First, in the restricted cash flows, the news is positive. As discussed earlier, you can see the fund balance for the year decreased by $6.9 million. However, that is due to the defeasance transaction that we executed in November, and that cash outflow is noted on line 16. Had it not been for the defeasance transaction, the fund balance would have grown by over $7 million. Page 15 is our 25 restricted cash flow projection. You can see we expect to grow that fund by almost $6 million in the upcoming year. And as we discussed this past October, it's possible that management may seek authorization from the board later this fall to execute another defeasance transaction. That, of course, will depend in part on how strong restricted tax revenue come in over the next 8 to 9 months. Lastly, page 16 shows the unrestricted cash projection. No changes from what we presented on the budget. Again, we'll update the board in May on those assumptions. Both the restricted and unrestricted funds remain in a stable and healthy state, which I mentioned earlier is a position of strength for this organization, and is why Marty and I keyed in on those outcomes as part of the 2024 process. Mr. Chairman, that's my presentation today. Happy to entertain any questions.
Any questions for Steve?
Yeah, I know on the restricted revenues, obviously we're looking very good, but looking at the food and beverage tax revenue is off, maybe about 300,000 or so from what the estimate was. I was wondering if you had any insight into what might be driving that, and if all the media attention for the new 7.9% city sales tax might have maybe thrown off some businesses from collecting the full 8.4% on food and beverage, and if there's anything that we could do, as a board, as the center district, proactively to get businesses, to make businesses more aware of the food and beverage tax, and they are obligated to pay it.
Yeah, we've talked about that internally, Bill. To know if there's been any sort of impact from that 2% tax. I think right now it's a little unclear to us. We were waiting to see, once the final December collections come in February, see if there's any sort of true up that might be following along with December. Typically, we'll see sort of these big quarterly gains at the end of each quarter as some businesses are remitting on a quarterly basis as opposed to a monthly basis. We do have a contact at Department of Revenue that collects the tax revenues on our behalf, and that's certainly something that we can bring up with them, see what sort of feedback they're getting in the city and county on that.
Okay, because I know with the city, when we noticed some non-compliance with the new 2% city sales tax early on, we worked with DOR to, they would take on kind of the larger retailers, and then we had some kind of public information campaigns to contact community groups that had business owners, organizations, things like that. We just put some messaging out there and say, hey, look, even if you're not collecting it, you are ultimately on the hook for it, and they do pay interest if they don't pay it. So it's in their interest as well as ours. So just maybe something to consider for the future.
Understood. Thank you.
There's evidence that people are not paying the additional 2% tax.
Early on, yeah. You remember the first few months there was some.
I mean, that would just result in a collection action because the Department of Revenue is going to look at gross revenue times 7.2%, right?
Right. So you remember
so you're only paying at 5.2%. You get a bill
right
with interest.
So you remember the first few months collections were looking a little bit lighter compared to what we thought we would bring in, and a lot of that was non-compliance with some of the larger retailers. And they made up for that in future months.
So it's a collection issue, not a liability issue.
How does that,
Doesn't affect us at all.
how does that affect us? I guess is the question. I have the same.
Because Department of Revenue is going to send us what we're entitled to, whether they collected it or not, correct? And it's up to them to collect the delinquency.
That is not my understanding.
I would assume
They remit what is collected, not what should have been collected.
how do they get that's true?
I mean, they're not going to give you money that they didn't collect.
Well, that's a cash
They have to
cash
get it
issue
done
versus an accrual issue. I mean, if a business is required to remit 7.2% of their gross revenue, whatever the base is, and they fail to do so, it just goes on, and then
I mean, eventually
eventually be
it
collected.
should be collected. But
so we
he's
only
just saying
receive
that,
the
like, for the-
delinquency when the delinquency is collected.
Correct.
Right, when the delinquency is collected, but in terms of if that doesn't get caught until 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road, yes, that revenue is then received. But in the meantime, the entity that's entitled to that revenue is being shorted.
Why don't we, Steve, if you can just follow up with Bill or Liz or just, Bob, make sure that we're understand how it works.
Yep, absolutely.
Let's see.
Well, I would assume
I know
that we receive a remittance from the Department of Revenue.
It's not a ton.
We receive some sort of reconciliation. They'll send us a check or probably
The funds are
mail.
deposited directly with our trustee at US Bank, and then the trustee releases those funds to us pursuant to our general resolution. So
Is somebody reconciling that remittance? Make sure that it matches what we're entitled to?
DOR has, we've requested this only from time to time, which is an enormous amount of records that
It is
that
enormous.
reply back to the remittance. Yeah.
So we don't know that they're sending us the correct amount. We're just assuming they are.
We do not audit that remittance on a regular basis. That's right.
And anecdotally, I would just observe from time to time that, I went out for dinner and 7.9% was charged. It occurs.
No, let's follow up on that.
Yeah,
That's
not
another
a huge
place.
amount.
We're charging the rent.
Well, that's right. We better audit this business.
Special standard
Stop
too,
it at
yeah.
his place. Sure. That would be a good news
You
story.
can, for sure. Anytime.
The average check turnover one of our establishments is probably higher, so the impact of the shortfall would be.
Well, I do think there's a lot of things tied into that, right? Because there are higher prices now for people going out. And I think that food and beverage businesses are a little bit slower because of, not just because of that, but because of a lot of economic things. And I think there's probably a lot of things wound up into it. I'm sure it's not the only driving factor. It could be something that we should look into just to make sure. And as we go forward, maybe there's some money. Sure. Any other questions? That was a good question.
Well, now you raised some interesting, because I've never dealt with the mechanics of Department of Revenue. Actually, they send you a check or electronic transfer to a trustee. That's not easy. With property tax, we assume 100% collection when we recognize revenue.
Right.
Even though it's not 100% collection. Yeah, I assume the DOR would operate the same way with sales tax. If they assume 100% compliance, send us a check accordingly or remittance. And then if there's not their delinquency, we collect that delinquency through tax foreclosure, or in the case of the Department of Revenue, through their collection process, which ultimately is a tax lien somewhere down the road. So it's equivalent to a tax.
Yeah. I mean, as I understand with sales tax, they distribute to municipalities, counties, municipalities, what is collected, not what should have been collected.
Understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Property taxes, we assume 100% collection, even though that isn't true.
That was not collected.
Right.
Necessarily. All right. Well, I think again, let's understand what it is. And some homework on Steve's end just to dig in. And, other questions on the budget specific? Oh, and then, all right. With that, I'll turn it over to Marty and have our CEO update and report.
A couple of things I meant to step in before we started the meeting, but I would like to have everyone acknowledge that today is a National Baker Morning for former President Carter. Thank you. Would like to share with the committee that earlier this week we received notification from Devin Mayhew that he has appointed Senator Rob Hutton to serve on his behalf on our committee effective immediately. So did reach out to the senator yesterday, have not been able to connect with him, and hope he will be able to join us, if not in person, virtually next Friday, the first board meeting of the year.
Who was serving on his staff previously?
He was.
Oh.
He was serving, and he may have attended once in person, but he was pretty regular virtually.
Oh.
Given his responsibilities, he can't just spend as much time as I know he had wanted to. We're happy to have Senator Hutton on our board. Steve, I think I need to spend a little bit more time with you reviewing your narrative, because a lot of what I have drafted for next week's report, how great a job finance did, I had in my notes. I don't have to say it since you said, well, I think you took mine. Anyway, just briefly, what I will go into more detail next week is not to belabor or beat a dead horse, but there are a number of highlights that I shared in a year-end memo back in December to all of you that I would like to just review briefly, just to take a quick snapshot and look back at 2024, because there were a lot of milestone events in the history of the district that I just want to make sure we all keep front of mind and appreciate. Recognizing that 24, while it did have its milestones, is now in the history, and it's our job to make 25 and beyond as historic and impactful as we did 24. So I'll be going over that. Steve did identify that we fell a bit short in the advertising sponsorship line. I'm very encouraged by business that was closed in Q4 for 25 and beyond. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we're seeing because we have a corporate sponsorship team that is very aggressive in going out there. And those of you who've been on the board for a while, Bob, Jim, may remember the day where we didn't have anyone selling corporate sponsorship. And it was a line item that we knew we could grow upon, and 5-6 years ago really focused on that. So we're seeing a real interest in elements that we created as part of the expansion, but also elements that we've been able to integrate into the South building. So I think there's an opportunity to achieve, if not surpass, the 2025 number.
Are we selling doors or selling walls?
We're selling fixed
Whatever,
signage.
everything for sale.
We're selling the digital signage in the building. We've got signage outside of all the meeting rooms that we're selling stuff. And the nice thing about some of these sponsorship deals is the fulfillment is relatively inexpensive. So it's more net, the net income is impactful. We also, one of the deals, and I'll talk about this next week, was with Frito-Lay. They're a part of PepsiCo. We have PepsiCo as our soft drink, non-alcoholic beverage provider. We've also made a nice deal with them to provide sponsorship for some of their Frito-Lay products, as well as using Leave Your Restaurants to help sell those products on our campus. So all new revenue streams that we have not in the past really maximized, and we're getting them. I'll recap the event activity, major events that we've had since our board meeting. We've been busy since the October board meeting. I'm going to share a couple of those events with you. Something that I'll talk about in greater detail. It's the time of the year as we get into 2025, where end of 24, we've completed the review process for all full and part-time staff. Staff has not been made aware of what kind of increases they'll be getting, but that'll be happening next week, and I'll share that with you in more detail. But we've this week, I believe through Thursday of this week, today, all the mechanics have to be in place so we can get into the system for next week. I'll talk about the upcoming events we have coming for the Q1 and Q2 of 25. And I think Bob and Bill might be a bit interested, as I'm sure the whole board is. I'll give an update on our conversations with the representatives from the city in regards to our discussions over the pilot agreement. We've had two very productive meetings. We have one scheduled, I believe it's for January 27th, again with the group. And those discussions are very cordial, we're moving along. I think there's been some very good dialogue. We did exchange proposals in the last board meeting, and in the 1 and 2 weeks, we're going to go through them and sure to see counter proposals. So it's moving along, and pleased with how those discussions are going. Chairman, that's the overview of what I plan to discuss more detail next week.
Short for you. Thank you.
I can go longer.
No, we don't talk about. Thank you for that. Appreciate the updates. Any questions for Marty? Good. Other than that, the next topic is just our board meeting agenda review, which is attached pretty much very similar to what we've gone through here today. Nothing else. We will have one action item, which has to do with internal compensation. What page is this on? 21. I think for the most part, I think that's the only, we'll have one closed session and then a vote on that, I think. And then an update actually also from CAA, Mike from CAA Icon. That'll be his final report, right? That'll be his finest pension update and reporting out. So other than that, if you want to see any, again, as always, if you want to see agenda items added, please get them to us well in advance, because we have to publish the agenda a week in advance minimally. And if you have anything else you want to discuss, certainly always open to do that. Committee meeting dates are in the back. Our next committee meeting dates are until May, I think May 8th, Thursday, May 8th. So that's the next committee meeting and the next board meeting. Aside from that, we have our full board meeting next Friday to go over. Unless there's anything else, I'm going to seek a motion to adjourn. So move. We have a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Senator Johnson.
No, all good. Good morning.
You also missed the tofu nachos. So.
I'm okay with that.
You're awesome. All right, first order of business, Michael's call roll.
Grady Crosby,
Here.
Mark Flaherty,
Here.
Representative Kalen Haywood.
Here.
Jim Cantor,
Here.
Rick Marcus.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Second order of business is any discussion, and then subsequent approval of the meeting minutes from our last governance committee meeting on November 7th. Do we have any discussion? If not, I will seek a motion for approval. Have a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Meeting minutes are approved. That will turn it over to Steve for our financial report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. Today's update will be our last review of 2024 financial activity until Baker Tilly's presentation of the audited financial statements at the May board meeting. Overall, today's financial news regarding 24 is positive and not materially different from the update that was provided to the board in October. Before we get into the numbers, just a couple quick updates. Number one, regarding 2025, we continue to forecast the budget the board adopted in October. For your reference, we've included in today's packet the 2025 budget income statement and capital budget. Will provide a more comprehensive update on 2025 financial activity at the May board meeting. And number two, Baker Tilly is in process of conducting their preliminary 2024 audit field work. No issues or concerns have been identified thus far. The district's finance team will be spending the better part of the next 45 days preparing for their primary field work, which is scheduled to occur in March. And those results will be presented by Baker Tilly to this committee at the May meeting as part of their final audit report. So let's get into the 24 review. And while I traditionally like to start with identifying the bottom line net income first, and we did beat our budget net income in 2024, which we'll talk about in just a minute, I do first want to summarize the significance of the financial successes we had this past fiscal year. When Marty and I presented the 24 budget in the fall of 2023, we identified two specific outcomes we sought to achieve the upcoming fiscal year. Number one, to show year-over-year growth in the district's unrestricted fund balance. This was an important goal for the district for several reasons. The unrestricted fund is the lifeblood of the district. It's the working capital management uses to support the ongoing operations of the business and allows us to make investments into our two most important assets, our people and our buildings. Without a stable and healthy unrestricted fund balance, the business can't grow. In 2023, we had negative cash flow in this fund, which was planned for in order to make the necessary investments in preparation for the opening of the expansion, which further stressed the importance to show growth in 2024. And I'm proud to say that we achieved this goal. The second outcome we sought to show was year-over-year growth in the district's restricted reserve fund. Annual growth in this fund has been a central component of the district's long-term financial strategy established in 2020 and most recently reviewed with you at the October board meeting. Robust restricted reserve fund serves as a critical mitigation strategy to adequately protect the district from an unexpected decrease in restricted tax revenue collections as a result of dramatic economic events. In 2024, we in fact did grow the balance in this fund to a level that exceeded what management believes is necessary to mitigate that risk. Thus, an opportunity formed to put those excess funds to work for the district, which ultimately resulted in the defeasance transaction that the board authorized in October. That transaction produced three critical outcomes. Number one, it saved the district millions of dollars in long-term debt service payments. Number two, it created long-term future borrowing capacity and flexibility, which is the fifth prong of the district's long-term strategic financial plan. And number three, resulted in a bond rating upgrade from S&P by not one, but two notches, taking the district from BBB positive to A. This will lower future borrowing costs for the district. Probably can't convey enough how much I personally ruminate on the health of these fund balances, but I am extremely proud of the work that both management and the board has done to get them to their current condition, which is ever the more extraordinary coming out of the economic conditions we faced during COVID. These balances are a position of strength for the district. In addition to these fund balance objectives we established for 2024, there are three other notable successes I want to mention. Number one, of course, is the completion of the expansion project on time and within the financial parameters set forth in the authorizing resolutions adopted by the board in 2020 and 2022. Marty and Mike Abrams from ICON will discuss the project life cycle, more detail in next week's board meeting, but let me just say it's simply remarkable that this project was completed in such a successful way. Number two, and in part related to number one, excess investment income earned from project proceeds boosted the balance of contingency funds on hand and allowed the district to make additional capital investments in both the north and south buildings. The investments made this year will reduce pressure on future capital expenditure budgets, a strategy that will preserve the strength of our fund balances. And number three, I'd be remiss if I did not mention the significance of the events we hosted in 2024. The impact to our operating P&L was meaningful, of course, but the value these events generated in terms of awareness to our properties in the city of Milwaukee cannot be understated. In June, Sarah Mayo presented to the board media impressions. The RNC event brought international attention to our campus and Milwaukee, and the Connect conference hosted in September exposed meeting planners from all over the world to our buildings and city. The dividends the district will receive from these events in terms of future business is invaluable and will keep our sales team extremely occupied going forward, which is a good thing. Stable fund balances, long-term capital planning flexibility, a successfully completed expansion project in a destination that is in high demand. The achievements of 2024 have created a future for the district that is healthy and full of opportunity. So with that said, let's get into the numbers, starting first with the event mix summary, which is page 4 of your package. Column C represents the number of events we actualized in 2024. Column B represents the number of events we budgeted. As you can see, we fell short of the budget goal by 10 events, 319 budgeted compared to 309 actualized. You'll notice a big variance in our corporate meetings category on line 5. Typically, these events contribute less to the bottom line than others, so the overall financial impact was minimized, as you'll see in a moment, to not prevent us from beating our budget net income number. And while we did not hit our event budget number, we did exceed last year's total significantly, and we believe we are well positioned to achieve the number we budgeted for in 2025. So with the event mix as a backdrop, let's get into the 24 numbers. We'll start with the income statement first on page 6 of your packet with column IDs EFG and H at the top, which compares our annual budgets to our annual forecast. To get right to the points, you can see on line 65, column G, we exceeded budgeted net income before depreciation and expansion debt by almost $4.2 million. So how did we get there? Well, scrolling up to line 14, total operating income is up almost 7%, as you can see in column H. Overall, event revenues, as noted on lines 1 through 5 and 8 through 9, collectively came in much stronger than budget by about $1.6 million. And that's quite remarkable considering we hosted less events than budgeted. As discussed in October, you can see lines 10 advertising revenue and line 12 parking revenue missed budget expectations. However, we remain optimistic that we will see substantial gains in these categories in 2025. Moving down to line 27, column H, operating expenses exceeded budget by about 11%. Line 15, labor, line 17, contract services, and line 18, utilities are all over budget. And really, this is a reflection of developing a budget around a theoretical operating plan for the North Building. I think I beat to death the topic of utilities in October, so I'll spare you that. I believe we are better dialed in on what to expect for 2025. As for the other two categories, labor and contract services, there were a few contributing factors to this overage. One was the need to bring in temporary labor to backfill positions that we could not hire qualified candidates for or were open due to attrition. Temporary labor on an hourly basis is more expensive for the district. And two, there were moments this year where we felt compelled to staff at levels greater than we expect to see moving forward due to training needs or to have redundancy in the North Building to protect against the unexpected. We look to have a more optimized labor model in 2025. You'll notice the event expense category, line 20, is over budget. This line item captures primarily those payments made to our arena tenants in the form of revenue share and food and beverage merchandise sales. The Admirals in particular had a strong ending to their 2023-24 season via an extended playoff run, which helped drive up this number. Line 34, tax revenues is better than budget. To be clear, these numbers represent actual collections through October, with November and December collections forecasted at last year's actuals for now. So some potential for upside here as these numbers go final in February. Line 35, interest income is also better than budget, primarily due to investment income earned on project proceeds. As noted during the budget presentation, we expect this category to normalize in 2025. As for non-operating expenses, no new update on the big variances since October. Line 49, visit Milwaukee, is up relative to budget by about $230K. This is due to stronger than expected city tax revenues earned in the fourth quarter of 23, as well as better than expected county tax revenues in 2024. And line 50, legal services is up as Hush Blackwell became the district's attorney of record before, and we spent time working together to bring them up to speed on district business issues. All of this leaves us with a positive variance to budget net income of almost $4.2 million, as noted on line 65. Any questions on the income statement? Pages 9 and 10 provide a current snapshot of our 2024 capital expenditures. Looking at line 43, you'll see that we're coming in under budget by approximately $205K. You'll see quite a few projects that were not undertaken, as noted by a $0 spend in the forecast column. Page 13 represents a number of items unplanned for but needed to be addressed this fiscal year. Overall, the focus of this year's capital spending has been on projects that deal with life safety, building functionality, code compliance, revenue generation, and contractual obligations. At present, the district is not concerned about meeting future capital maintenance needs. Pages 11, 12, and 13 in our packet are our cash flow projections. We'll start with page 11. Restricted cash flows. Again, the news is positive, as we discussed earlier. You can see the fund balance for the year actually decreased by $6.9 million. However, that is due to the defeasance transaction that we executed in November, and that cash outflow is noted on line 16. Had it not been for the defeasance transaction, the fund balance would have grown by $7.2 million. Page 15, page 12 is our 25 restricted capital projection. You can see we expect to grow the fund by almost $6 million. And as we discussed this past October, it's possible that management may seek authorization from the board later this fall to execute another defeasance transaction. That, of course, will depend in part on how strong restricted tax revenues come in over the next 8 to 9 months. And lastly, page 13 shows that unrestricted cash projection. No changes from what we presented at time of budget. Again, we'll update the board in May on those assumptions. Both the restricted and unrestricted funds remain in a stable, healthy state. And I said before, is really a position of strength for the organization, and why Marty and I keyed in on those outcomes as part of the 2024 budget process. Mr. Chairman, that's my presentation. Happy to entertain any questions.
Are there any questions for Steve? Right. Thank you, Steve. With that, I'll turn it over to Marty for our CEO.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Steve, before I start, I'd like to ask you where we stood with hearing from Moody's, because we did have that shared with the board in October that we met with Moody's. Any update on timing of hearing from them?
So similar to the process that S&P went through with the district this past fall, Moody's had a similar conversation with me, Marty, and our representatives at Baird in December, just before the holiday. They are currently going through their processes to confirm if they are prepared to do anything with their debt rating. We should have a touch point with Baird tomorrow. We'll get an update from Justin on that matter, and hopefully some positive news to share here.
I meant to ask that in the prior meeting. I forgot. Thank you. Just a piece of housekeeping. We did receive a communication earlier this week from Devin Mayhew letting us know that he was going to be assigning his position on our board to Rob Hutton, who is the state senator from the 5th District. Rob, I hope to be joining us next Friday, if not in person, virtually. That's just why. As I've done in the past, I'm not going to go through everything I'm going to talk about next week. I'm just going to touch on what the topics are. So if you have any questions about the topics, happy to go into them. I'm going to start off with not rehashing what Steve has said, but I do feel compelled to share with the board a number of the key highlights from 2024. It was a milestone year for the district, and Steve has already talked a little bit about. A couple of things I want to go into a little bit of detail just so that we don't forget them, but it really sets a new level of the bar for the district. We've grown a lot in the past 6-7 years. 24 was great, and it's just the beginning of what the district is going to be doing in years to come. So look back on 24, talk about a little of the sponsorship agreements we're seeing come up in 25 and beyond. Steve mentioned that we missed the budget number by a couple $100,000. There's been some very encouraging discussions, in fact, agreements coming in Q4 that start in 25 that I'll share with you next week. I'm very encouraged that in an area that we did nothing with 6-7 years ago is now very robust, separate and aside from the naming rights agreement. So share a little bit more about the detail there, go through recent event activity that's occurred on the campus since we last met in October, and then set the table for what we see coming up of note in 25 that I'd like to share with you. At this point in our year, during the first of the year, is when we implement any type of increases, merit increase, otherwise to the staff. Individual reviews for full and part-time staff were to be completed by mid-December. Steve, Nyla, Tuxon, our VP of HR, and I are the organization's compensation committee. So we're meeting with the different department heads, going over the reviews that each of them made and going over recommended increases for full and part-time staff. They will be notified early next week, just prior to our board meeting, what those increases will be. As I said, talk a little bit about upcoming events for the year. And then lastly, giving the board an update on the discussions we've been having with representatives from the city about the pilot agreement. You may recall that the city reached out to us wanting to renegotiate the terms and conditions of the pilot agreement that we entered into in 2020. We've had 2 meetings, we had one in October, one in early December. We're meeting with them a third time, again, January 27th. They've been very productive discussions. They've been reasonable, both sides. At the last meeting, both sides exchanged written proposals, and the written proposals really more just topics to be discussed and explored further. We'll be responding to each other's requests at our next meeting. I'm not sure where this is going to go, but the discussions are very positive, and I'm very optimistic that this will be resolved to satisfaction to both sides.
You really have to do it.
Don't have to, no. And
So this is
it came up in the city's finance committee last year, 23. That's really where it when they became aware that we weren't making a payment. And from the board's perspective, while we're certainly willing to hear what they'd like to see changed, I've shared this with the committee. I've said this to Bob. It doesn't mean that the city gets what it wants. It means that there's a discussion and we're willing to make modifications, but there are also modifications we'd like to see. So it's truly been thus far a negotiation, and I expect it to continue that way and end amicably. I'm very optimistic that it'll improve for the city. It'll improve for us as well.
It was brought up in the finance committee. So everyone's aware. I think we're just trying to be very transparent with it. But to your point, the deal's the deal. It's in place. We're just trying to negotiate good faith and be partners. And I think it'll be a win-win.
Yeah.
For everyone.
I think you got to be thought. I mean, right? You don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
But it's not like you're doing it. It's like it's a transaction where your counterparty is not going to ever do business with you again.
Yeah.
And so I don't think you want them sitting around figuring out how they can screw us the next time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you're better off, if you can get to something that's relatively neutral. I think we expected to pay it anyway. I don't think we went into it thinking we weren't going to pay. I think it just sort of that's right. Okay, so and then the worse for the wear.
The primary issue for the city is liability, that they can count on the payment, and payment isn't something they can count on in the existing agreement because it's based upon a formula, a calculation of our numbers. And the first couple of years, the calculation warranted that they get paid, and it's an all or nothing based upon that calculation. So I'm confident we can come to an agreement with them that would provide them certainty. But it's not going to be the certainty at a figure that they otherwise could see if we made the calculation. So it's all good, really. I think this is a good thing. To your point, Greg, we're not moving this convention center to another locale. So we want to be a good neighbor, good citizen of their area.
We're not moving the team.
Which
Just
team?
like an NBA team.
No, we're not,
NFL
no,
team, we can't just
we
get
did
up.
not, did not just talk about moving.
Or NFL or MLB.
No, correct.
So yeah,
That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
that's it.
By the way, you didn't think about too, think a few steps ahead. You never know where somebody local might end up in a governance position. And at some point, we may need the help of not necessarily the city, but someone in the state. And all of a sudden they say, "Oh, I remember you." Yeah,
And not in a good way.
exactly.
We're confident that the team will come to the good negotiated. Any other questions from Marty on the CEO report? Again, we have a more robust accounting of the report for the board meeting coming up next. If there's anything you'd like to see in there, please let him know. Board agenda review is the next topic, and that is basically exactly the same as we'll go through today, with the exception of we will have an action item and a vote by the entire board. So please make sure we're there. Also, Mike Abrams from CAICon will be giving his final update. Yes, that'll be the closing update on our expansion to everybody. So I think that'll be good, and I think we're in a good spot with all that. So that's next Friday, 8:30. Again, I don't anticipate it going extraordinarily long. If there is an action item, so I would ask everybody, obviously on this committee, who will be involved in the next discussion to be there at least virtually. With that said, the next item is personnel discussion. So I will seek a motion here. I will read this and we'll seek a motion to go into closed session. So the committee may convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute S 19.851C to consider the employment, compensation, or performance evaluation of certain WCD employees over which the WCD board has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. Committee is expected to reconvene in open session following this agenda item. I'd seek a motion to go into closed session.
I'll move it.
We have a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we will move to closed session. We'll take a minute. front of you.
Do you want to make a motion that the governance committee recommends? An amendment.
We don't have one.
Say some naturals.
Did. I don't know, should we?
As a placeholder, I think, yes.
All right, so we'll do
Then
that in
we
open.
Yes.
Yeah. Ready?
Sliding.
All right, thank you. Sorry. Appreciate time, everybody. I think coming out of that would make a motion for the governance committee endorsement of the compensation plan and proposal that we have in place with amendment. Yeah. Got a second?
Second it.
All in favor? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Good. Future meeting dates. Item 7 are in your packet. We have a board meeting on Friday, full board meeting. Then our next committee meetings are not until May 8th. So just again, put that on your calendars, which we will go through the audit. Is that right? That's the audit.
May.
Yeah, for May. Any items that you want for that May timeframe, certainly send to us. Everything's got to be on our agenda at least a week before so we can send the agenda out. If there's anything else, please let us know in the meantime. With that, I would seek a motion to adjourn.
I'll move it.
We have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.